an occupation, as the watering of flowers is rather Monty's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't all a becoming language. I knew perfectly well and quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he lays stress always when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys perfect health. His gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of responsibility and duty.
I suppose that's why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Oh, Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. His merriment and triviality will be out of place in this conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
Wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
Oh, I do not think that I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I do not think I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favour of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I don't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote him myself in earlier days.
Do you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. And I hope that in Happily, I don't quite like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
Well, the good ended happily, the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. It is very unfair. And was the novel ever published?
Alas, no. Unfortunately, the manuscript was abandoned. I use the term in a sense of loss or mislaid.
Oh, I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up from your garden.
Oh. Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do us so much good to have a short stroll in the park with you, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not said anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I note that. But I felt instinctively that you had one. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Well, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He likes to spend his Sunday in London. He is not one whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? The doctor, my name is Letitia.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I will see you both at evensong, no doubt.
I think, dear doctor, I will take a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee, you may admit, it is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geology, horrid German.
Oh, Tristan, where are you?
Mr. Earnest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Have you told him Mr. Worthing is in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak with you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here. Suppose to want to talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I'm rather frightened. So afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does.
Ah, you are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You were under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you, I hear, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, you mustn't think that I am wicked, Cecily. I'm not really wicked at all.
Well, if you are not, then you're certainly deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. Have you not been leading a double life, pretend to be wicked and really being good the whole time? That would be hypocrisy.
Well, of course I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that. Well, I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack will be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement when one wants to retain any sense of beauty of life. But I still think you'd better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone to buy your outfit.
Well, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you'll require neckties. He's sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said on Wednesday night that you'd have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I have received from Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Or would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It's rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You look a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered if one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I have never any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
How about a chenille?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it'd be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says all good things are a snare.
They're a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
I don't think I care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You're too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Oh, believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realise, dear Doctor, that by persistently remaining celibate, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often, I am told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Brightness can be trusted. Young women are green. Oh, I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing?
Mr. Worthing? Oh.
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother,
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
dead.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. But at least you have the consolation of knowing that you are always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had his faults, but it is a sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I received a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it would seem.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Oh, charity, my dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? That hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday? My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, days of humiliation, and festal days. I last delivered it in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent Among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Oh, that reminds me, dear Doctor, you mentioned christenings, I believe. I suppose you know how to christen all right? Of course, you are continuously christening, are you not?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often tried speaking to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, wasn't he?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But this is not for any infant, dear Doctor. In fact, I am quite fond of children. No, the fact of the matter is I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I have no memory of it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you at all, or if you believe I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion.
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, and I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony to be performed?
I thought I might trot around about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
I don't think it would be much fun to be christened alongside other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack, I'm so glad to see you're back. But what horrid clothes you've got on, do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child.
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you've got a toothache. And I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest, who arrived about half an hour ago.
Well, that is nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Don't say that, Uncle Jack. No matter how badly he may have behaved in the past, he is still your brother. You would be so heartless to disown him. I'll tell him to come out and you will shake hands with, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Oh, good heavens!
Brother Joe! I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand, are you?
Nothing would induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here utterly disgraceful, and he knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, don't say that. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, who goes so often to visit. And surely there's good in someone who's kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side. But I must say, I think Brother John's coldness towards me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it's the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you do not shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never!
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. The little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algy! You must get out of this place at once. I do not allow any bumbering here.
I have brought Mr. This things up to the room next to your own, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
This luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful lie you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew that way. I do not like it.
But I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you for a whole week in your house as a guest.
You are certainly not staying with me as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave so long as you are in mourning. I should think it very unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw a man take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, it's better than always going about overdressed as you are.
If I'm occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden is utterly absurd. However, you have got to leave by the 4:05, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey. This bummering, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I am in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to order the roses. I thought you were Uncle Jack.
He has gone to order the dog cart for me.
Is he taking you for a nice drive?
He is going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It's always painful to part from anyone whom one has known for such a short period of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. Even a momentary separation from anyone whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell her to wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you appear to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'll give anything to take a look at it. May I?
No. You see, it is very simply a young girl's record of her thoughts and impressions, and as such, meant for publication. When it arrives in volume form, I do hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I've reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I have first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Why, of course. We've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, we of course have formed chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And any man who's very much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement? actually settled?
On the February 14th last. Worn out by entire ignorance of my existence, I decided to end the matter one way or another, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day I bought this ring in your name and this little bangle of true lover's knot I promised you'd always wear.
Did I give this to you? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. And here is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember all too well I was forced to write them for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Do let me read them, Cecily.
Make you far too conceited. The last 3 you wrote me after I ended our engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled, but even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I decided to end my engagement with Ernest. I think it's better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why was it broken off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, with a little help from others, of course.
I'm so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes.
Now, don't laugh at me, darling. It's always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone with the name of Earnest. Something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. Is there any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest?
But my dear child, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, pretty little loving darling, I really can't see why you should reject the name of Algernon. It's not at all a bad name. In fact, it is rather an aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name were Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear I could not give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
Then I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean on most important business.
Oh,
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
well, considering we've only been engaged since February the 14th, and I've only just met you today for the first time, I think it's rather hard that you should leave me for such a long period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Oh, Miss Fairfax has just driven over from the station. She has very important business with Mr. Worthing.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
No, ma'am. He went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, no doubt money will want to get one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack and some of his philanthropic work in London. Don't quite like it women who are interested in philanthropic work. So forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other for such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be an an opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. Certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
No, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years, resides here also.
I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, 'tis strange he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. Grows more interesting early. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you, but I'm bound to state that now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly,
Oh, pray do, Gwendolyn. I think if anyone has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
well, to speak with perfect candour, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
It's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It's his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they've not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who's your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolyn, there is no reason I have to make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
You seem to be under some misconception, Gwendolyn. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It pains me more than I can tell you, dearest Gwendolyn, if it's that it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
The poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise. I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever poor entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never approach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I am trapped Earnest into an engagement? How dare you? Now is not the time to show the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
Well, I'm glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Surely the tea things here as usual, miss.
Yes, as usual.
Are there any interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
There are a great many, Miss Fairfax. I'm on the top of the hills, quite close, where I can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose it's why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
I believe it's what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe that aristocracy are suffering very much from it at present. It's an epidemic amongst them, I've been told. May I have some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I distinctly asked for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
Save that poor, innocent, trusting boy from machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. Felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived on such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I'm trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there was some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The man whose arm is at present around your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh.
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
Just a moment, Ernest. Are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens! Gwendolyn?
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh, is your name Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh,
Are you really called John?
I could deny it. I could deny anything if I liked, but my name really is John. It has been John for years.
the gross deception has been practised on the both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet runt Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? Both of us are engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is a very difficult thing for me to be forced to speak the truth. In fact, it is the first time in my life that I have ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I must say I am quite inexperienced at it. However, I must tell you quite candidly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all, in fact. In fact, I have never had a brother at all, and I certainly have no intention of ever having a brother in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
No, it's not a very pleasant situation for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of affairs is what you call bumbering, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is too. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That's absurd. One has a right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist, good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunbury. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea about absolutely everything, I should fancy, of such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I can gain from this whole wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to go down to the country as often as you used to, dear boy. And a good thing, too.
Your poor brother is looking a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear up to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defence for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I simply wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no question of that ever happening.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
I don't see how that's any of your business.
If it were my business, I certainly wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there, calmly eating muffins, when we are in this dreadful situation, I can't quite make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't very well eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter will probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless you eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Well, there is certainly no reason for you to eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would have cake instead. I don't like cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
You just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
Can't possibly expect me to go about having some dinner. I never go about my dinner. Nobody ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you forget about that nonsense, the better. I myself have made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. We cannot both be christened Earnest, it would be absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence I have ever been christened, and I should think it extremely improbable I ever was. And so does Dr. Chasuble. You, on the other hand, have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was nearly carried off early this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, I know. But I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Oh, that's nonsense.
Jack, you're at the muffins again? I wish you wouldn't, there's only 2 left.
But I hate tea cake.
Why on earth then do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? But my dear, you have hospitality.
Algie, I have already asked you to leave. Why don't you just go?
I haven't quite finished my tea,
Oh,
and there's still one muffin left.
oh for...
When the love in your eyes I could see, when the voice that I heard, like the song of the bird, seemed to whisper sweet music to me, I could hear the dull buzz of the bee in the blossoms, and you said to me, with a heart that is true, I'll be waiting for you. In the shade of the old apple tree. In the shade of the old apple tree. When the love in your eyes I could see. Where the voice that I heard, like the song of the bird,